might be, you were spanked and someone was pretty cruel with you, or it could just be like a very rigid setting where you have to look a particular way, you have to sound a particular way to be able to make your family life work. And maybe you get a belt, but you could also get a glare from your mom or your dad if you acted out. And a lot of my clients that come from these rigid family homes, they describe the sense of powerlessness and humiliation. Sure. So the powerlessness of like, my mom or my dad ruled the family with an iron fist. My desires weren't cultivated or known. I was always seen as the selfish one, or I couldn't even express desire in my particular family. And, a lot of parents aren't just like mean or rigid. They also create context for a lot of humiliation for children. And I used to think that that was hyperbole. And yet after being a therapist for so many years and even looking at my own humiliation that I have done at times to my kids, it's just one of those realities that we have to deal with. Like, who has made you feel small and powerless in your life? And so I think the question that I think we have to ask ourselves is, where does all of that humiliation and powerlessness go? So that's part one. Right. Part two is a disengaged family system, and you can have both types of family systems. So disengaged is kind of like when care is overlooked. So when you came off the school bus when you were in middle school, did you have a mother or a father that knew that something in your face had shifted when you were at school? And did they attune to you? And did they ask how you were doing? When there were difficulties, like the male, when boys are about 13 years of age, they have something like a shot glass of testosterone in their system. By the time that they reach the age of 15, that goes to a pint glass by equivalent parts per million. So you are experiencing like massive changes in your body that are going to lead inevitably to sexual desires that you never had before. Sure. Well, the amount of people, including myself in my Southern Baptist high school, that thought that they were becoming evil because they had sexual attraction. I mean, we're laughing, but it's heartbreaking that families and school systems and faith-based communities are disengaging and neglecting and abdicating the central role of sex education for our kids. And so when you're growing up in a disengaged emotional family, you weren't given the sex education that you had. You feel completely unprepared for life, and you don't really trust that relationship is a place to be deeply known and desired, even in the midst of screwing up or not understanding it. So if we take anger and then we take powerlessness, and we also take the sense of disengagement and a desire in us to find intimacy, that's where I think porn and a lot of unwanted sexual behaviors are so appealing, is because they appeal to the Matthew verse that you read. Like, we are heavy laden people, and we have not known rest in our family. And so when Jesus says, in Matthew 5, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. I have never met a client who says, I need comfort for the stories of harm that I have been part of and that I have done to others. But I think that's the powerful thing is, if we're not attuned to these places of powerlessness and disengagement, sexual sin is going to be deeply appealing to us, because porn is not about sex and fantasy and lust. It's the issue of power. It's the ability to take another human being and use them for my own sexual gratification. But it's also this sense of, lust, desire. A lot of my clients will talk about the porn that they go to. One of the things that they are drawn to is just the eyes of the man or the woman in the film, and the sense of like being looked at. That's a really powerful connection. So if you're thinking about it from attachment theory, which is basically how do relationships form, beginning with our mothers, our caregivers, but that's what we need from a good friend, from our parents, is the sense of they are staring into us. And if we don't get that, then we are going to be searching and scanning the world for people looking for us. And that's something that I think Dr. Kurt Thompson says really well, is that we grow up for people looking for us, and this never stops. And so I think that's what we need to be able to hold together is, on one hand, I am angry and I am processing all of these places that power and humiliation have been used, but I'm also lonely. I'm wounded, I'm desperate. And I think we need to have integrity with both storylines to be able to grow.
Sure. And there's this shame cycle that you talk about. Which I was curious in, because I was talking that a little bit with the lady last week that we had, Eden. And, I think there's a difference between shame and conviction. I think the enemy uses shame, and the Lord uses conviction to bring him closer to you. But you talk about this shame conviction and how when you fail, or when you do the thing that you don't want to do, it crushes you, and then it ends up becoming the main reason why you do it again. Talk to me about that shame cycle, and why do we stay? Why do we stay in this cycle?
So a couple ways of thinking about this. A lot of times we think that we feel shame in response to our behaviors. But the point that I'm trying to make in my book is, no, we have these negative beliefs about who we are. So when I went, and my nickname was Donut in middle school, and when people said things about who I was and my face and my intellect, all of those things shape this inner psychology of kind of like, I am ashamed of who I am. And so later in life, I am going to pursue things that promise a relief from the shame, but then reinforce it. And I think that's a really critical place for people to learn, is that you don't just feel shame in response to the behaviors that you've participated in. You have to go and excavate the stories that led you to solidify this shame-based mentality within you, and then look at, how does my life provide me with irrefutable evidence that I am broken beyond repair. Another part of that is the way that, like, the neuroscientists talk about shame, is they will say that you need to be thinking about shame as like a manual transmission car. And so you've got 3 pedals: the gas, the brake, and the clutch. And so, we have a sympathetic nervous system that is essentially the gas pedal in our car. So it's what drives us to our mother initially, to climb up in our crib, to be able to crawl around the world, our world and our family home, eventually work up the courage to ask someone out. Basically everything that you want in life, you need your gas pedal or your sympathetic nervous system for. But then we have a braking system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is essentially, it's what allows us to rest, to calm down, to digest our food. And there's this really great relationship between, you need a gas pedal, but you also need a brake. The dilemma is that children don't have a fully developed parasympathetic nervous system. So we rely on that from our parents or caregivers, that they need to, hit the brake and say, like, you actually need to go to bed, you need to brush your teeth,